And I just want to say a quick hello. My name is Liz Call. I'm the University Archivist at RIT Archives, and we want to welcome you to the RIT Archives virtual opening for our newest digital exhibit called Epidemics, Economics, and Elections, the editorial cartoons of John Scott Clubb and Elmer Messner. And as I speak, if there's going to be any kind of websites or social media handles, Jody is going to be putting them in the chat. And so let us know if you have any questions about that, but the URL for the exhibit should go up in the chat momentarily. And I want to give a special thanks to Jody. Jody Sidlauskas is the Associate Archivist at RIT Archives, Rebecca Walker, the Digital Humanities and Social Science Librarian, and Melissa Hopkins is a community member and a donor of an addition to the club's drawings. And all of us, we worked together as a team to curate the digital exhibit, and it was a great experience. John Scott Clubb and Elmer Messner worked at the Rochester Times-Union, a daily newspaper, as editorial cartoonists. Together, the over 6,000 cartoons of Clubb and Messner held at RIT Archives span a century of change in Rochester, New York, and the United States. Editorial cartoons are snapshots of the culture in which they were created and can be difficult to translate through a modern lens. Collectively, the cartoons address major issues in local, United States, and international history, from World War I and Prohibition to the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement. The curatorial team set out by selecting themes resonant to today and contextualized them for a contemporary audience. This project is an ongoing collaborative effort between RIT archive staff, the RIT Library's Digital Humanities Librarian, RIT faculty and students, and a Rochester community member and RIT Archives donor. The vision driving the work behind this project is to make these obscure and essentially hidden cartoons accessible and relatable. In the spirit of inclusion and accessibility, the digital exhibit intentionally steers away from stringent academic scholarship to allow for a myriad of voices to be represented. In addition to integrating the digital exhibit into teaching at RIT, we are creating programming that aspires to draw members from RIT and beyond to interact and engage with the cartoons featured in the exhibit. Epidemics, Economics, and Elections will continue to evolve as RIT faculty and students from a wide range of disciplines and members of the larger Rochester community create responses in all mediums to the cartoons. So we are so excited to have you with for this opening, and I have to say this is my first virtual event that I'm hosted. I've been to many, but this is my first, and I can say I'm as nervous as if I was in person. It's kind of crazy. So just to give a brief overview to our amazing presenters, Leigh, Rubin, and Phil Hands, I just want to thank you guys so much for sort of being able and willing to do this. It's awesome. So just to give a little brief information about our main guest. So Leigh Rubin, and Jody's going to put up his URL to his website and his handle, his social media handle. Leigh Rubin is an accomplished author and cartoonist. He has written 20 books. 2019 marks the 35th anniversary of Leigh's internationally syndicated cartoon, Rubes. It has a little R with a circle around it. I don't know if that's different than copyright, but anyway, Rubes, which is now distributed by Creators Syndicate to hundreds of newspapers and media outlets worldwide. His work has been featured in film, television, and advertising. Leigh also enjoys a busy schedule, giving thought-provoking and entertaining presentations on art and creativity at conferences, as well as professional organizations all around the country. In 2018, Leigh began his tenure at RIT as the college's first cartoonist in residence. So welcome, Leigh. And Phil Hands. He also has, Jody's going to be chatting his social media handle and his Facebook page. Phil Hands is the editorial cartoonist for the Wisconsin State Journal in Madison, Wisconsin. Hands began drawing cartoons for the State Journal as an intern in 2004 and became a regular freelancer in 2005. He joined the staff at the State Journal in 2013 and is currently the only cartoonist on the staff of a newspaper in Wisconsin. His cartoons have appeared in USA Today, Newsweek, Time, and The Washington Post. His cartoons are syndicated nationally by Tribune Content Agency. A fierce political moderate, Phil's cartoons attack the extremists on both the left and the right. He learned long ago that no political party has a monopoly on bad ideas. Phil has won a number of state and national awards for editorial cartooning and was a 2012 recipient of the Society of Professional Journalists Sigma Delta Chi Award for editorial cartooning. Born in Syracuse, New York, Phil grew up in the Detroit area before moving to Wisconsin in 2005. He is a graduate of Kenyon College in Ohio and received his master's degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Phil lives in Madison with his very understanding wife, Trisha, and two adorable children, Owen and Claire. In his spare time, he enjoys drinking coffee, eating cheese, and being cold. Well, that's good, right? Because it's cold. Okay, so we will have time at the end for questions and answers, but feel free to type in questions if you think of them and you don't want to have to write them down. You can put them in the chat and we will get them asked in the order in which we receive them, or you can just save them until the end. So without further ado, Leigh and Phil will talk about the then and now of editorial cartooning, using cartoons from the digital exhibit, interspersing their own cartoons throughout.
Well, thanks, Liz. I found a little trick so I'm not nervous on these Zoom calls. I imagine everyone's not wearing pants. It works out pretty well. Anyway, so yeah, I'm Phil Hands, and we're going to just get right into looking at some of these editorial cartoons. I'm going to do some of the analysis since I am a professional and an expert in this, I guess. But so first things first, we're going to look at one of the more recent cartoons because it just popped out to me, and it kind of shows you a contrast between how cartoonists used to work and how a cartoonist like myself works today. This is the Elmer Messner cartoon from 1956. The man who exclamation point. And you can see very faintly at the top of these cartoons as I'm pointing at my screen, which makes no difference to any of you guys. But at the very top, you can see there's little pencil sketch that says the man who, because they would do these cartoons and then later on they would have the typesetter come and add some actual text type on top of it, which would print in the newspaper, but you wouldn't see that on the original artwork. And speaking of the artwork, I love these old school cartoons. They're beautifully drawn. And what's really interesting about this drawing of Dwight D. Eisenhower is just how deferential and realistic it is. It's hardly, I wouldn't call this a caricature. I would call this an illustration. And my hunch is that this was probably taken from a photograph that the cartoonist traced over and then copied and then drew on top of that. I'm looking at the way the teeth are drawn in particular, and it looks like it was traced to look as realistic and positive as possible, which is different than how cartoonists nowadays draw politicians. We can go to the next slide, and you can see how a modern day cartoonist might treat the president. This is one of my cartoons. This is Donald Trump saying, "Thanks to my leadership, we are putting America first," and he means in COVID deaths, of course. But you can see that the caricature there is pretty grotesque and extreme. He's got these puffy eyes. He's got this hair that does all sorts of weird stuff. It's simplified, it's stylized, and it's not photorealistic or deferential. But I don't just do this with politicians I dislike. So I'm pretty clear. It's pretty clear that Messner was a fan of Dwight D. Eisenhower. I'm not a fan of Trump. I do kind of like Biden a little bit, I guess, but even he gets pretty extremely caricatured in my cartoons. This cartoon's titled A Political Primer for Progressives. Biden cons about him. He's not liberal enough. He's not a fan of Medicare for all. He's not a fan of free tuition. He's not a pacifist. He's not woke. He's not articulate. He's not coherent. Not an outsider. Not a woman. Not a person of color. Not young. Not respectful of women's personal space. But pros, he's not Trump. So this is how like a cartoonist like myself would handle sort of modern day politicians. We can go to the next slide.
That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, you like this one, Leigh, right? What is this you like about this one so
much?
Well,
I just like it looks like he's writing on Horton from Horton Hears a Who.
Look at like a Dr. Seuss elephant?
Pardon?
Like a Dr. Seuss elephant, right?
Yeah, it definitely looks like a Dr. Seuss cartoon. He's got eyebrows on the elephant, which is great.
Yeah, and some people don't know this, but Dr. Seuss was a pretty successful political cartoonist before he became a famous children's book author. So there's a whole book about his World War II cartoons. And here's another interesting, one thing that's interesting about this cartoon is you can see again the caricature of Richard Nixon is very sort of respectful and deferential. You can tell that Messner appreciated Nixon and liked Nixon, which is different than the way cartoonists like Herblock or Paul Conrad drew Nixon. They ended up on Nixon's enemies list, but I imagine Messner did not at any point. And the other thing about this cartoon is that it doesn't really have a strong opinion behind it. It's more of just sort of an illustration of what's going on. But I paired it up with one of my cartoons that I've done recently. I think this is from earlier this year. I've used the trope of, or the scene of politicians riding their respective mascots in the past. So this is a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin where we have candidates riding elephants and donkeys. And the trick with this cartoon was that our Supreme Court races for our Supreme Court elections are, in theory, nonpartisan. You're not supposed to be part of a party, but we all know they really are. So I'm using sort of the same technique that Messner did, 60 years ago, but to tell a different story behind it.
Now, I've got no elephant editorial cartoons because I'm not an editorial cartoonist, but I do use elephants, and they're quite fun to draw. And so I decided to put this one in because even though, unless I put a political slant on it, there are some Republicans that probably don't agree with the president, but they keep quiet about it. So this is, an awkward silence greeted Sylvia's single daughter, for despite her mom's best efforts, it was practically impossible to ignore the elephant in the womb.
Yeah, this will be a punny event.
Yeah, if you don't like puns, you've come to the wrong place.
And so what's the next one here?
Oh, the next one, yes.
Oh, yeah, this is a pretty classic critique of politics that you would see done in all sorts of ways in editorial cartoons, where you can see Congress is pushing a baby stroller labeled national interests. Love the labels everywhere. But he's distracted, glaring at the pretty fall elections walking past. And one of the critiques I have about some of these older editorial cartoons is that it almost, the only women you see are sort of leered at. They're always sort of these pretty young things that are distracting the real men in the room who are doing the real work. But that's what this cartoon is about.
Yeah, and I liked how he used the the manhole cover trope, which is something I like to do on occasion. You've got to keep your eyes open, and you've got to pay attention to the news, even if you're reading Observer. You're not being very observant.
Yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, and here's this one's titled "There's no question about it this year. If you want to vote, you'll have to register." And the man is all in a huff. And I think he's wearing a vest like me too, Leigh, right? He got a little vest on underneath there?
He's got something. Well, he's very well dressed. People dressed better back in the day.
Yeah, it was more fun to draw people when they all had fun suits on, as opposed to like T-shirts like I draw people nowadays. But he's disgusted by the stinking pile of garbage, which is the Washington mess, which we all can relate to that. And I've drawn cartoons basically exactly the same as this. Which is this is the billboard for the average Joe, and we have somebody saying here he's not exciting or inspiring. He's pretty boring. Uncle Sam says boring sounds great compared to the 24/7 Trumpster fire. So politics is garbage, except my politics are on fire. It's the same thing. It's the same cartoon 60 years later.
Now we've got a debate coming up tonight, and people are pretty decided, as you had mentioned. They're pretty decided on their own parties, as you were referring to earlier before this, to a cartoon you're creating right now. And or can you go to the next slide? There we go. So you go, and if I'm elected, I promise a rubber chicken in every pot and a teeny tiny car in every garage. And it says they're all a bunch of bozos, but at least this guy speaks our language. Yeah. And I did a real callback here to when Herbert Hoover was president, because he promised a chicken in every pot. So it's actually not that far off from these way back in the day, editorial cartoonists. And of course, the teeny tiny garage was, or teeny tiny car in every garage was, it was a car in every garage. But of course, they're clowns. But they're certainly they've settled on whoever they like, whatever clown is going to be their candidate.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Herbert Hoover, the next cartoon I think actually features him. And this is a John Scott Clubb cartoon. This is the first Clubb cartoon we're looking at. You can see he's got this cool signature that looks like a the suit of clubs from the cards in the bottom right hand corner, and this is titled "Looks Good to Her." And here we see the women's vote being smitten by handsome Hoover. Oh, isn't he lovely? And Hoover was a Republican. The Democratic Party, which is the donkey there, looks very excited that this woman's vote is all excited for Hoover. And the Republican Party is just aghast that Hoover is getting the women's vote. And you can tell that Clubb doesn't think much of women's suffrage from this cartoon, and thinks that these silly women are picking the wrong candidate for office, and that'll help these Democrats win election. Which is, it's always one of the things I love about editorial cartoons, especially historic ones. There's such these snapshots in time. We all forget that when nowadays we think women's suffrage is one of the greatest things in the world, but in the day it was controversial, and like 40% of America didn't want it. Just like 40% of America is opposed to stuff right now that in 50 years we'll think was, how could anybody be opposed to that? And cartoons are a great snapshot at showing how the world used to be and the different issues we used to have. And I still use devices like this to this day, where I have the Democrat excited because the Republicans are looking at a bad candidate. That's something that cartoonists will still do nowadays.
I want to point something out here. The way that the elephant is there, it's almost as though Horton hears a Hoover. Sorry.
I thought we said no more puns.
I didn't get that memo. My phone's turned off. So we have what's the next slide there? I just want to point out, I just love how you really capture the style of the day, the matronly style of the day. That's Taft wearing his
William Taft in drag.
Look at that purse with the dangly little what's that thing on the bottom, like a tassel, and it's just the beautiful cross hatching, and the lighter background. I mean, he's really accomplished artist.
Oh, he makes me look like a hack. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the artistic style, I will say that even here, he's making fun of Taft, but the caricature is very much just an illustration of Taft's face. I mean, if William Taft was president nowadays, with his large waistband and his that mustache, us cartoonists would have a field day. These caricatures would be grotesque, and he would probably go home crying at night. We were so cruel to him. But I mean, even though this cartoonist didn't think much of Taft's policies and would make fun of him in cartoons, he's still drawn, at least his face is drawn in a very respectful way. I mean, he was a more civilized era.
Oh, so we got Taft in drag, so my dress, my shoes, my earrings, good heavens, Herb, just where do you think you're going? I got a job at Dairy Queen. So it's perfectly acceptable. It was acceptable then, it's acceptable now.
That's right. I love it, Leigh.
Thank you.
Here's a good kind of cartoon cliche, which is the vultures circling. This is Hovering Over by Elmer Messner, 1947. So this is just after World War II. And I imagine it's famine, disease, and communism hovering over post-war Germany, with Uncle Sam looking on worrisomely.
Yeah, I think vultures get a bad rap here because despite their diet, I mean, they provide a valuable public service. So using the iconography of vultures, I think, is unfair. Especially because, I mean, their diet doesn't look good to us, but I still think they have some sense of taste. So this, the name calling, the backbiting, the accusations, frankly, I just can't stomach politics anymore. And considering our diet, that's saying a lot.
Yeah, that's really good, Leigh.
And I want to point out, this is a newspaper reading vulture right here.
An intelligent vulture.
That's right.
He's not watching Fox News. He's reading a newspaper. This one took us quite a while to figure out what was going on. Because I have this vague knowledge of what a dance card is, but this one is titled The Empty Card. And so here we have this poor matronly woman with her empty dance card, and she's labeled "Win the War Legislation." And this is done right before the end of World War I. And in the background, you see the lecherous congressperson who's gallivanting about with the frivolous floozy that's labeled suffrage, and she's got the full dance card, and the poor old useful legislation is being left in the corner, undanced with by that mean Congress.
Yeah, it's not fair. It is again, it's beautifully rendered, but yeah, I like the expressions he has. Look at the old guy,
Yeah, dancing with the pretty young
like
thing.
lecherous old guy.
And drawing politicians dancing is always a good time. And I do that in some of my cartoons. If we go to the next slide, I think that's mine. Yeah, so this is the former governor of Wisconsin. We had this great organization called the Government Accountability Board in Wisconsin, which was our ethics board that was world renowned for being so fair and decent and honest. And when it was so fair and decent and honest, it kept investigating Republicans for their bad deeds, and so they shut it down. And so this is Scott Walker and the Republicans dancing on the casket of the GAB. So that's my dancing cartoon. I thought that was a fun image.
Well, I wanted to keep the dancing and the party going. Well, if you think you're so good, why don't you take the first swing? Well, all right, maybe I will. Well, they're doing their two-step or whatever step they're doing there with their
square dance, right?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the fun multi-labeled cartoon.
Yeah, so one of my critiques of older editorial cartoons is they are overly confusing and overly labeled. And so this one is titled, and this is 1919, so this is over 100 years old, titled Making Him Stick to His Bed Will Be the Doc's Big Job Now. And the bed is labeled Pledge to Oppose Compulsory Health Insurance. So I imagine in Rochester, I think this is a New York specific cartoon because the person in bed is labeled the machine assembly ticket, making me think it's the local legislature in Albany, and they need to drink their legislation tonic and stick in bed, which is to oppose health insurance for all. So it's kind of a very convoluted way of being opposed to health insurance for everyone, I think. Does that sound right to you, Leigh?
It works for me. I mean, I'm impressed because this guy was a concierge doctor. Yeah, he's a house call.
Well, that's a house call. Well, that's how they did it back in the day.
I guess so. It's very impressive. So
what's the next one?
Yeah.
So this reminded me of this cartoon. This ran in the Onion 4 years ago, or in 2004, and it's sort of making fun of very confusing editorial cartoons. And the title is Nonsense. This is an election year, and so there's a donkey and an elephant, and there's labels all over the place. And if we go to the Onion article, this is a fake cartoon, but the Onion article was political cartoon, even more boring and confusing than the issue. So Portland, Oregon, a political cartoon in Monday's Daily Oregonian was more boring and confusing than the issue it attempted to address. And so it goes on from there. But I feel like I don't want to disparage Clubb, but I feel like, that cartoon in particular is probably a little more confusing and boring than the actual issue it was about. And I think some of these older cartoons fall into that trap, which is a trap we try not to fall into, Leigh, but occasionally I'm sure we do, right?
Well, I don't know about you. I don't even put any labels on my stuff.
So here's my cartoon about compulsory health insurance. It's about Obamacare. And so this is Donald Trump trying to end Obamacare with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell as the doctors. And Paul Ryan says, we did everything we could. And McConnell says, but unfortunately, it looks like he's going to make it. And in the background, Barack Obama looks very happy as Obamacare that he didn't die in the operating room.
We were talking about insurance here, and with the ever rising cost of premiums, it's like, what goes up must come down, except health insurance premiums. And this is the caption is Newton's revised law.
Yeah, that's great. What was the next? Oh yeah, so you knew something about the March of Dimes that I didn't know, right, Leigh?
Well, it's just I would say raise your hands if you know who Eddie Cantor is, but so it was a way to raise money for polio, as far as I know. I mean, everybody is free to Google this, and it's still around. The organization's still around, but it was if everybody contributed a little bit of money, you would be able to put a lot of money toward the effort to conquer polio, and it was these are really like more like appeal cartoons, where they're not really taking any political side. And this next one is really cool. I like that glowing sunlight, the lamp of hope or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the sort of the halo coming from the lamp, or the glow coming from the lamp, and the Mother's March on Polio. And I liked these cartoons, and I paired it with one of mine, which because we still to this day as cartoonists sort of bring up these hardcore these tough social issues, and we use some of these exact same devices like cute children and halos and these glowing things to sort of send a different message about a cartoon. So this is my concerned woman saying, letting in Muslim. I did this cartoon in 2017 when there was the Syrian refugee crisis. And this woman says, letting in Muslim refugees could threaten the Christian values of our nation. And then I have Jesus Christ with the poor children saying, if you won't help those in need, what good are your Christian values? And so, cartoonists always kind of taking on the social causes still continues to this day. Oh yeah, and now it's fun to think about this cartoon as this was titled A New Hope, and this is the polio vaccine. And to think of, we sort of are in that world right now where we're thinking of a vaccine being our new hope to this coronavirus crisis. But it is weird that vaccines are controversial, and I've done quite a few cartoons about them being controversial, like this cartoon.
Can you go back to the other one for just a second, Phil?
Oh yeah, go back.
I just wanted to point out, you've noticed this. Look at the face on that kid. It's like a mini man. It doesn't look like a nice childish looking face at all. It's like this full grown guy there.
Well, I can tell you, Leigh, I'm guessing what this is that Messner spent, like, deadline was approaching, and he'd spent a couple hours doing his beautiful rendering of Uncle Sam. And cartoonists don't spend a lot of time drawing cute kids, especially from behind that 3/4 behind angle. And it was probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He had a 5 o'clock tea time, and he had to finish up those kids so we could get the cartoon out the door.
Well, I'm sure you draw little babies that look great, though, right? Just like
babies. My babies are horrible.
Let's see one.
As you can see
the
next cartoon.
Oh yeah,
that baby is that baby. I wouldn't take that one home with me. Anyway, but this is my vaccine cartoon. So the doctor is pointing the vaccine and says this prevents measles and the facts, and this prevents goofy conspiracy theories with my anti-vaxxer. Yeah. So it is funny that vaccines are now sort of this controversial topic we have to draw cartoons about.
You've got anti-vaxxers, but I've got anti-waxers. This is we specialize in Brazilians, total hair removal, and this is the radical anti-waxers. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen the cartoon before, Leigh.
I know.
It's and so this is an issue near and dear to my heart: prohibition. It looks like John Scott Clubb was opposed to prohibition, which doesn't surprise me because I know this because at my newspaper in the Wisconsin State Journal, we were opposed to prohibition too, or we were in favor of prohibition back in the 1920s, but that was specifically because we were pro-suffrage. So people don't know this at the time, but suffrage and prohibition were basically the same issue in the 1920s. And so people that were for prohibition were also for women's suffrage and vice versa. And we know where Clubb stood on women's suffrage. So here's another schooner wrecked, and this is the schooner of beer crashing against the rocks. With apparently beer was used as a treatment for the sick. Oh, I've got a cough. I need a couple IPAs, right? But I still like to use prohibition as an image in my cartoons to this day. A couple of years ago on State Street, State Street's our big party street in downtown. We're a college campus, and there's lots of bars in downtown. And our mayor was sick of all the bars downtown, so we tried to ban new liquor licenses down there. And so
I love this
themed cartoon with the mayor saying, "Tonight we're going to party like it's 1925."
I like the kind of sepia tone you've got going there. It's very cool looking.
What's annoying about that, Leigh, is you draw the whole thing in color and then you add like brown on top of it until it knocks it all back to look sepia-ish. Way too much work.
Well, I do have a Prohibition cartoon. This is the SS Sobriety, and it's ship christening during Prohibition.
And they just keep smashing the bottles.
Smashing the bottles over and over again. All those beautiful bottles. Oh, we got a major labeled cartoon here.
This is The Real Leader, and this was a cartoon. I think we figured out what this was about, Leigh, but we might have had some trouble on this one. I think it's an anti-prison reform cartoon, right? That's what we kind of came to the agreement on.
Well, if you look way at the crowd, these are guys carrying guns and sticks, or nails in them, and they're very they look like really bad people. And the labels, I can't read all the labels on the guy's chest or whatever creature that is that's leading the revolt. But I know I did look up some of that. What is it? Howe's Law, Hough.
The Baum's Law, yeah.
Oh, Baum's Law, and those were sort of very harsh sentencings, like 3 strikes and you're out. Today, I think it was 4 strikes and you're out back then. So they tightened it up much later in the U.S. But I just thought that was really interesting that these are similar issues we're still dealing with. In fact, most of these issues we're still dealing with.
That's right. So I think this cartoon was based. I think there was a movement to reform prisons going on at the time, and I'm pretty sure this cartoon's saying, "Don't be duped. The movement's being run by the pro-criminal group," because there's so many pro-criminal groups out there. The pro-petty thug group. Anyway, so prison reform is still an issue. One of the best things Donald Trump did was he did do some national criminal justice reform, and I did this cartoon about that. Trump at his State of the Union saying, "I'm very glad I could reform our very unfair criminal justice system before I enter it."
We've got the various security types of prison: minimum security, medium, maximum. This is a minimum and maximum.
Yeah,
this explains
just a big ball.
Too easy shot. Yes, it got a big giant ball, and obviously he's in for a lot longer. The guy on the bottom.
Oh, this was a fun one. So
yeah.
This is winter, right? A Winter's Tale, because it gets cold in Rochester, right? So I thought this was about winter. So what is my cartoon there then? I got one next, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah. So
we should go back to the other one though, just to look at that. This is how I
would draw a winter cartoon. Arctic temperatures.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to go? So Arctic temperatures, wind chills of -50, frostbite in minutes. Maybe I'll wear a hat today. That's what we do in Wisconsin when it gets cold.
Yeah, if you could go back to the other one, because there's a lot of really interesting all those little impish-like things are the germs. And this is winters. You think it's just a winter cartoon, but it's more like this is going to be a really tough winter with all the epidemic going on and whatever else is happening. It's so small I can't read the little.
Well, the little germs. It's labeled assorted flu, cold, grip.
Oh yeah, we looked that up. It was another word from the
fever and germs.
Yeah, they got the grip.
Yeah, of course we draw germs different nowadays, right?
Yeah, we do. It was going to be a long winter because of this, and I decided to celebrate this. And, keep lying. It's going to be a long winter. We can go to the next one. Yeah, and so we draw germs a little different nowadays. It's so this is my COVID-19 crashing into the economy. And that's how I draw a germ nowadays. How do you draw a germ, Leigh? Well, I draw very similar, only they're a little bit smaller. For the last time, you moron, social distancing doesn't apply to us. We are the virus.
Yeah. Well, I think this was the worst labeling on all the cartoons.
Well, excessive use of label penalty.
Yeah, so this is Uncle Sam telling the pessimists to don't look on the bad year of 1930. Look on all the bright stuff heading our way. Easier money, U.S. government contribution to projects. Because we all know that 1930 was a great year for the economy, right?
Yeah, right after 1929. So
it got better in 1931, right?
Well, you've got to be optimistic about it. Right here he's trying to look at the bright side. And so, some people see the glass half full, others see it half empty. And Um, if you can jump to the next cartoon, it's a just a different perspective on it. He goes, I see it as half empty. You always were an optimist.
Yeah, I love that.
It's all through a cat's eyes lens.
And this is one of my favorite drawings in the whole collection. This Elmer Messner cartoon with the meat prices up in the clouds. I just love sort of the really long legs. And unfortunately, I mean, the one knock on this cartoon is you didn't have to label the guy as an ex-consumer. I think it would have been pretty clear what was going on in the cartoon.
Yeah, he certainly can't.
Anyway, I love the drawing and I love the visual gag there.
Yeah, it's great. That's certainly the opposite of ground beef.
Yeah,
sky high beef. And this was definitely no amateur job. They only took the most expensive cuts. So we have obviously this meat is as expensive as it was back in 1948.
I love the cow there too. Oh, the bulls, yeah, those are great.
He's smoking. He's a seasoned New York City detective.
Here's another great Messner cartoon, which has this a sea monster, the octopus, labeled Steel and Coal Strikes. He's reaching out. It's titled "Reaching Out," and you can see his tentacle is labeled "Forced Shutdowns," and the forced shutdowns are pulling apart the industry. It's interesting. It's clearly an anti-labor cartoon, pro-business, which you don't see that much nowadays. Definitely from a more conservative perspective, there aren't as many conservative political cartoonists out there anymore. So it's interesting to see that. I like to draw sea monsters in my cartoons, and sometimes I overlabel them too. This is probably my most labeled cartoon in the history of cartoons. This is the swamp, and we have my alligator labeled the GOP, and he says this is just another fishing expedition, and we have the Democratic donkeys, and their boat labeled House Democrats Investigations, and they are fishing in the swamp for all of these scary, fishy creatures that have Trump hairdos labeled nepotism, cronyism, hush money, tax evasion, financial fraud, corruption, and shady business deals. So even today, we like to label a lot sometimes. Maybe too much.
Their hair all looks very familiar.
It's Trump hair, man.
Oh, okay. I was just
yeah.
Oh, blonde wigs.
I figure if you're going to label a little bit, you might as well go for broke on the labeling. Just go for the extreme.
You got it. So I have sea monsters too, or rather octopi or octopuses, and this is a little celebration of Halloween. Boo!
Yeah, and, you made him ink.
He inked himself.
So what we got next? Oh yeah, this is another beautiful drawing by Elmer Messner with John Q. Public as Little Red Riding Hood, and I thought at first that the Public kind of looked a little bit like Adolf Hitler. Didn't you agree with me on that one?
Well, a little bit, yeah, but it was a little bit. It's just odd why John Q. Public is dressed as Little Red Riding Hood as a man as Little Red Riding Hood. I mean, what?
It could have been a little girl.
Yeah, why wouldn't you put a little girl in there? But we can't ask it. So we can only speculate. But I love the wolf in that. It is just beautiful, even with the little drooling coming.
Oh yeah.
And so I draw a lot of pop culture gags, and of course Little Red Riding Hood appears every now and again. Gee, Grandma, what a big all right already. This is Little Rude Riding Hood.
Yeah. Oh yes, this is the Valentine's Day cartoon, and his Valentine is empty, and this is a Clubb cartoon from 1924, and this is the American farmer looking for his Valentine Day from the farm program from Calvin, looking for his Valentine's Day present from Calvin Coolidge, and by heck, it's empty, like the promises, empty promises. So. Another beautiful drawing, and it's an empty box there.
Yeah, it's got that pathetic-looking crow right there. Even the crow is suffering throughout the winter.
Yeah, and the crow is it's a little bit bizarre because the crow is actually, your eye jumps right to it because it's the darkest thing in the cartoon. Everything else is a little bit gray toned, and that crow is just kind of bright black. And It does not. I mean, it's a fun image of a crow. It doesn't really move the story along at all, but I guess it's just a fun detail.
Yeah.
Oh, and here's my Valentine's Day cartoon. This is during the 2016 election when Bernie was running against Hillary, and she says, "Speaking of inequality," and she's got one little Valentine that says, "You are A-OK." And Bernie's got all the Valentine, all the love. It says, "I heart taxes, sharing is caring." He's got organic chocolates, be ours, be my single payer is my favorite little Valentine. Yay socialism, we heart Bernie, and feel the bear. Aw. Bernie felt all the love, and Hillary got none of it.
Yeah, and I just, since the farmer got nothing and he got an empty box, the only thing I have with an empty box is what a mime would get. And this is the mime so joyously receiving his air guitar.
Yeah. Oh, and here's this great Christmas cartoon from John Scott Clubb, and I'm gonna keep this in my files because I just love the way he draws Santa Claus. I draw a lot of Santa cartoons every year, and I just love the way he's approached this. It's really beautiful. And here's the poor little guy labeled the public, and his wish list for Santa Claus is, "Dear Santa, please bring me fewer holdups and knockdowns. Bring less starvation and misery in the world, and no profiteering. Fewer factory shutdowns and workless days. I don't want any bootlegging or hardly any. Also, fewer taxes. P.S. Don't bring me any light sentences for crooks. I've had enough. Signed, the public." What a snappy caption.
That is he's got quite the wish list there. I gotta say, that's very, very impressive.
And we decided that a holdup and a knockdown, we thought that was like a mugging or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, yeah. Cartoonists to this day still draw the wish list cartoon. This is former governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, with his wish list on this grotesque Trump Santa. And so as Walker says, "Did you get the letter I wrote?" And he wants drug testing for poor people, wolf hunting seasons, no refugees, Medicaid block grants, and dirtier air. And Donald Trump says, "You've definitely been naughty enough to get everything on your list." So, there's my cartoon.
I was going to say your hands were very small on that.
Yes. Well, I'm yes, very, very tiny Trump hands.
Very tiny. So no wonder it takes so long to deliver the gifts.
That's right.
So I've got let's see. So I've got a Santa. You see, son, there really is a Santa Claus, and there's the two cats again, and they're optimistically looking at the fish bowl about to totter off.
That's great. Oh, and then here's the stocking cartoon. This was another fun one. So here we have this. This is titled "The Lucky Boy," and here we have this larger. I think was this a farm? Besides, this is a farm ant or farm wench.
Yeah, this is a bumper crop, and she's represented. I mean, as a bumper crop, she's a very big woman.
Yeah,
this is a big bumper crop that year.
Yeah, see what your auntie got you to hang up for Christmas, and the Western grain farmer is very excited to have that big stocking for prosperity. And then the bulletin at the bottom says, U.S. Agriculture Department, more than $9 million to go to farmers for this year's crops. Largest portion goes to grain farmers in Middle and Far West. So I guess this is a cartoon about grain prices, which is not a topic I've drawn a lot of cartoons about, despite the fact I live in a farming state. But I have used stockings in cartoons, and this is, again, former Governor Scott Walker saying everyone benefits from eliminating income taxes, so the poor get a little stocking, middle class get a medium stocking, and the rich people get a very big stocking.
This is one of my favorites here. This is the housing crisis, which we certainly are aware of that in California, or the housing shortage is beginning to get on my nerves, and then it looks like the master is living in the house, or somebody's living in the house. So this one dog is clearly annoyed, and I can relate to this, and I want to put my wife's very favorite cartoon in here. Welcome back, sir. Are you planning on being our guest for one night only, or will this be your usual extended stay?
Sleeping in the doghouse.
Well, my dogs will never turn their back on me. They'll never turn me out of the house. So, I think that's
so
all.
That was all of our slides that we prepared to talk about. We're happy to field any and all questions that you guys might have to ask about the cartoons in the exhibit or our glamorous lifestyles of being cartoonists nowadays. But
I have a question. Why did you use the term editorial cartoons instead of political cartoons?
Is that a question for me, the curators?
Well, whoever came up with the title for the presentation this evening.
Well, editorial, we use the word editorial with the collections for Clubb and Messner cartoons because they're not necessarily all political. I mean, you can argue that anything is political and everything is political, but their cartoons, like in the 6,000 plus that we have, they're not all addressing politics, but a lot are. So we went with editorial to be more encompassing.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
And I will say, as an editorial cartoonist, I do actually use the term pretty interchangeably with myself. So I don't particularly, I mean, most of the cartoons I do are about politics in one way, shape, or form. So I use the terms interchangeably.
Should I write something there? No.
Oh, I see something.
All right. Phil and Leigh, thank you so much. So rich to have your work and your commentary and the interplay with our exhibit. It's just brilliant. And I wanted to know about the market and how you submit your work. I know, Phil, you're working for a newspaper, right? Which is fairly unusual these days, as far as I know. And
yes.
So either of you, would you talk about how you submit your work and where it goes and the marketplace today? Thank you.
Take it, Phil.
Oh, well, so I'm not too involved in the general marketplace. I have an employer at the Wisconsin State Journal that pays me to draw cartoons for them. And then I also have a syndicate that pays me for the rights to distribute those cartoons. I don't do a lot of submission to any sort of outside groups. I mean, I know there still is a good market for editorial cartoons because I get hate mail from all over the country from people who hate my cartoons. So I mean, I know they're getting picked up, but we are still very much tied to newspapers, and I still don't really know what the future for political cartooning looks like outside of of newspapers. And I think newspapers will be around for quite some time, but I'm not positive about that one. So
I hope you're right, Phil. Yeah, I'm not tied to any one particular paper. I'm a friend to all papers. Whoever wants to carry mine or does carry them now. So I have a syndicate that represents me and will market my cartoons to various papers, or people need reprints for some particular reason, whether it's a textbook or a newsletter or a PowerPoint or wherever else, whoever else needs a specific cartoon for a specific reason.
We got a couple questions in the chat. I'm sorry, I didn't see them until now. But from Marty Golia, he asked Phil, do you get any editorial direction on number of local versus national topics?
Yeah, they do like me to draw local topics because I do work for the newspaper, and there are syndicates that provide you with national cartoons. And I started off doing nothing but local cartoons for a very long time. But as I built up an audience and a sort of repertoire, I got asked to be syndicated. A syndicate asked to take on my work, and now I have to do a certain number of national cartoons for the syndicate. So yeah, my newspaper would. I don't know if they'd like me to do all local. I mean, they'd like me to. I mean, they want me to make. They like it when I'm happy, I guess. So they like my cartoon. They like my work, and so I think they probably they like the local stuff better because they can't get that anywhere else, but they're fine with the national stuff as well because Madison is such a political town. People care so much about all these political issues that I really am speaking to the readers in my community when I draw national cartoons too. So.
Another question that came in, can you both talk a bit about your process and where do you get your inspiration or how do you focus your ideas?
Well,
Take it away, Leigh.
I'll start with that one. I typically sit down at my desk and have no ideas, and I have to sketch and erase and sketch and erase and sketch and erase and until I come up with an idea. And whether it takes 5 minutes or 5 hours, it doesn't matter. Sometimes something will just click with me during the day. I read an awful lot of, I read anything I get my hands on. Obviously, I'm reading more stuff online, but I still get my local paper. I try to keep the vacuum open to just suck in as much information as possible, and then distill it and find something that is that's interesting and relevant that people can relate to or have something in common with, which makes my job easier because I'm not just going out in some weird left field thing. Really, it's like anywhere and everywhere. And if I'm doing a presentation on Friday with Imagine with Brick City, and I really get into it there. If you really want to know that, can I put a plug in for this? I guess I already did, but yeah, Friday afternoon at 5 Eastern Standard Time. So come back, and I'll be here again without Phil. But you're welcome to join.
Yeah, you won't have Phil to hold you back anymore, Leigh. No,
yeah, that's no, that's where I'm gonna the secret of creating a perfect cartoon. Some conditions apply.
Oh, I'd love to hear that one. No, I find that creating cartoons is a perpetual struggle. Especially good ones. So I don't really have a set I haven't really figured out a set method that works. Sometimes I can just sit down and kick out really good cartoon ideas just by focusing on the paper in front of me and doodling, and they just come faster than I can draw them. Sometimes I hit giant walls. I've had success getting ideas in the shower. That can work sometimes. I've had some pretty good success getting good cartoon ideas while I'm jogging and listening to podcasts, or the Grateful Dead. Does either one will work usually pretty well. But I work the best when I sort of can clear my head a little bit and make some space for the brain synapses to coalesce into something brilliant, or at least decent.
I like the Dead. That's kind of cool.
And then I don't know about you, sometimes the visual image comes first, and sometimes the writing comes first, and you just got to go with whatever comes your way,
Yeah, it really it's not set. It's not set every day. I know what has to happen. It's how it all comes to be is the interesting / challenging part.
Yeah.
We have time for a couple more questions if anybody has anything they've been wanting to ask.
I would love to ask a question. My name is Ella, and I am the assistant archivist. So I have worked with these cartoons in person, and I've seen the collection from an archivist's perspective. But both of you, Leigh and Phil, are clearly craftspeople. You are doing this work every day and like refining your ways of telling stories or making points. And I wonder, as you were looking through the cartoons from 100 years of a similar craft, or maybe the same craft, really, what things stood out to you as being still relevant to the practice that you do? I know you pointed out a few images that you particularly liked or renderings that you thought were really good, but I'm curious to know what you learned or what stood out to you from a craftsperson's perspective.
I really like the cross hatching that went on, the detail that went into those. I mean, they did not look like they were rushed at all, even though I'm sure they were probably rushed sometimes. Like you said, like Phil was saying, you know, you got that deadline. When you're dealing with matters of an editorial nature, like an election, or that's something that's what's happening tomorrow, you've got to get that in. And that I don't know if the Times-Union was a morning or evening paper, so that would have affected when the deadline was for, you know, when there were both morning and evening papers around. So that's something that I didn't even think of when I was just looking at the cartoons. I don't know, Phil, what do you think?
Well, they're very different styles. I mean, Messner has this sort of this thick brushwork that's sort of inspired the way that I've always drawn cartoons. Before I started working digitally, which I do almost exclusively now, unfortunately, I do use a brush dipped in ink, which I can tell that Messner's using. But he also uses these beautiful crayons for these gray tones. It gives it this really lovely effect, and maybe I ought to try doing that sometime. It's just a really, it looks, you see those cartoons and they just kind of, they exude 50s, 60s drawings, you know. And Clubb has this very classically, almost nasty and cross-hatching ability. I think about Thomas Nast, the cartoonist from New York City back at the turn of the century. And Clubb's got that very similar style with that gorgeous thin line and the cross-hatching. The one thing that stands out to me about Clubb's cartoons is he didn't use a lot of blacks in his cartoons, and I found that really, for me, that really helps me understand where the eyes move, is where my darks and lights go in the cartoon. So it's hard to draw a cartoon without those sharp, those high contrast black areas. You see a lot more of those in Messner's cartoons. But they both want me to go back to art school and figure out how to draw. I mean, you know, they're just so talented, and maybe it's entirely possible that they had a sort of, because I wasn't familiar with the work before I started this exhibit, but I'm familiar with cartoons of the era, and they sort of look like other cartoons you see from them, and you wonder if this was a time when people had a real respect for the craft of drawing in a way that we don't have anymore, you know. And so I wouldn't be surprised if both Messner and Clubb, you know, had some pretty good training at illustration that you just don't get nowadays, even at like an art school, you know, because we're all into letting people express themselves and be free. But, you know, I think they looked like they had some real good drawing chops. You know, I had a really, we called him the art Nazi when I was in college. He was this really strict professor who wanted people to draw things the right way, and he was tough, but he was very clear that there's a way to draw stuff, and once you figure out how to draw stuff, then you can start being creative with it. And drawing is a skill that you can teach anybody, and these people were definitely trained well and had a lot of skill when it came to it, when it was all said and done.
Yeah, I was wondering, is there something in Photoshop you can take one of your cartoons and make it look like one of theirs? Just put some weird filter on it? I'd be curious to see, because you kind of did that with...
That would be cheating, Leigh. That would be cheating.
Well, that's what Photoshop is for.
I think we'll have time.
Anyway, I want to...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to promote. We have a short poll that we want attendees to take before they exit. So I wanted just to, we're going to launch that in a second. And it's 3 questions if you could answer it. But Phil, I want you to pick up what you were saying. And I think we saw at least one more question.
No, I think I was done what I was saying. I was just going to say how much I love looking. I want to thank you for inviting me here, because I just love looking at old editorial cartoons, and it's really inspiring. So
yeah, it is really fun. It's something I don't get to do very often.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just want to thank you guys for doing this. It was very, I mean, it's really, because, the curatorial team, we stared at these all summer long, and, we analyzed a bunch, and we were able to get some information to understand them, but it's certainly great to hear, other artists look at these, and kind of react to them and see what it brings, surfaces, so it's very interesting, because you'll notice details that we wouldn't have noticed. All right, one more question maybe while people are still filling out the poll? We are just at 7 p.m. But
I don't think I can fill out the poll, can I?
no?
I don't think so.
Oh,
I
well,
filled it out. I said it was a beautiful presentation done by very handsome men. You know.
Oh wait, I could do that. What do you know?
you can stuff the ballot box, yes. All right. Well, you know, I'm going to take it to the last screen here where we have, if you have any questions, you know, if you think of anything after the fact, if you feel free to email us at archives. It's ritarchive@rit.edu. We're happy to answer your questions or push you to other resources. And please visit our exhibit. And we'll be having events throughout the year around, now that the virtual opening is done, the rest of the exhibits are going to be around each of the E's. So our next event is going to be not in the order in which the title is, but the next one is going to be elections. It's not going to be in November because we just, you know, we don't know where everybody's head is going to be. So our, I should know this by heart, but I'm just going to look it up quickly. It's going to be on October, and it's going to feature RIT faculty member Hinda Mandel, and she's working with these cartoons with one of her classes, and the students are going to be analyzing cartoons from about elections. And so she's going to do a workshop about how to analyze textual analysis. So the event is going to be Thursday, October 29th, and I'm just going to copy and paste. Oh, I can't. Sorry, guys. It's on the public events part of the website, the digital exhibit, October 29th from 12 to 1. And it has a link to how to register for it. But everybody's welcome. You don't have to be an RIT student or member. Anybody can come, and she'll help you crack the code on how to read some of these cartoons. And hopefully we'll have one or two of her students in as part of the program. So thanks again so much for coming. It was great having you all here.
Thank you.
And Phil and Leigh, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing more events with you.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
For joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very entertaining.
Yes.
Take care, guys.